doesn't go out on Revolution Radio or anything?
No, only just in order for you to, I can't add you to the call. I have to accept you, and then, so we're on air, we're now on air with Revolution Radio. Okay. So, go
cool.
ahead.
I just want to say hi to everybody, say hi to you, Solaris Blue Raven, and, Noreen, and, Nighthawk, and everybody on the wonderful Revolution Radio Network and, freedomslips.com. Want to say thank you so much to everybody that contributed to our Life is Darn Good, yes, at yahoo.com. It was my, none of that money went to me, by the way. It just went to my legal people so that they had food, or should I say my law research team, not legal people, but law research team. And, the appeal is going swimmingly well, and we're just trying to basically unravel the maze of utter, just bona fide conspiracy of all the dirty tricks, low kicks and rotten licks they had to go through in order to do this to us. But, alright, so in the news today, you want to talk about Russia a little bit?
Please, what's happened to Russia? I've been in the garden all day.
Oh, okay, well, President Trump's in Helsinki right now, and he's having a tete-a-tete, sort of a détente with Vladimir Putin. Now, it's kind of interesting for me to listen to all this stuff about Vladimir Putin. Kind of interesting. Vladimir Putin's born October 1st, which is my birthday. He's a singer. He's a concert pianist. He's actually done concerts for the Russian people. He gets up on the TV and just takes phone calls like a radio talk show host for hours at a time. I would like to see one of our politicians try to do that. And, so on the right and the left, you have Brennan, the former CIA director under Obama, who was saying that, that Trump is committing treason, and he's basically saying things that border on sedition. So people need just a slight bit of history. I actually heard some right-wing talk show host say, he's no Boris Yeltsin. Seriously? Boris Yeltsin, who was the leader of the evil empire? Boris Yeltsin, who shot down a Korean Airlines flight plane that had one of my family friends on it, Congressman Lawrence McDonald, one of the founding members of the John Birch Society, who was a real pain in the ass of the New World Order, who was also murdered on that plane. As a matter of fact, he was at our house about 2 weeks before that plane went down. Boris Yeltsin, or should I say, Gorbachev, who Reagan walked out of the Helsinki Accords in the 80s, and he basically said, I'm going to get Gorbachev, and that's what then triggered Reagan into, number one, starting to fund the Mujahideen, which is Osama bin Laden back when he was a buddy of ours. Two, it triggered what was called Charlie Wilson's War, because then what Reagan wanted to do was then supply the Mujahideen with surface-to-air missiles to allow them to nullify Russian air support through Osama bin Laden, through Congressman Charlie Wilson. And three, he gave a super fund to a man named Leo Wanta, and you can do some research on this, but Leo Wanta's job was to basically turn Russian currency and the ruble and the Russian stock market into junk bonds, which he in fact did, which is the same thing that's happening to the United States actually before Trump took over, was basically what we did to Russia directly after they invaded Afghanistan. You'll also notice that it took less than 10 years for Russia to go bankrupt once they invaded Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is also known as the graveyard of empires. I mean, it defeated the Greeks under Alexander the Great, it's defeated the Russians, it's now defeated the United States, and notice we went bankrupt almost 10 years, actually 9 years, almost to the day of us invading Afghanistan as well. So, kind of an interesting thing here, just a couple of unusual things about Russia. When Boris Yeltsin was in the transition, all the businesses were closed, and so there was restaurants and everything else were all broke. So there's no way for them to get food. So the only people that would still deliver was Pizza Hut. And they were getting pizzas from Pizza Hut, and Pizza Hut is of course owned by Pepsi. And so when they were looking around for what the flag of the new Russian Federation was going to be, Boris Yeltsin, I'm not kidding, held up a Pepsi can. And the Pepsi can has a circle on it with a ball with red, white, blue, and Yeltsin said, how about we use this? And that actually became the flag of the Russian Federation, the symbol for Pepsi. So here you have Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has been kind of a stealth, secret double agent for a long time. When he was head of the KGB, he was also, and remember he had to keep this completely under wraps and his life was at stake, but he was a devout Russian Orthodox Christian. And he pulled all kinds of operations to protect the Russian Orthodox Church. And, the priests and the bishops and whatever else, and the followers of Christianity when he was still working for the KGB in that period of time. Now, when he became the president of Russia, he goes back and forth because he trades with Medvedev, I think it is, because he was president, then he was like prime minister, and he's back being president again. But when he became president of Russia, the biggest thing he did was he marched into the dacha, or castle, that was owned by David Rockefeller with a warrant, and basically kicked Chase Manhattan Bank and David Rockefeller out of Russia. Because here's what we learned. When I went to Stanford, and I went to Stanford for summer school for a trimester before I went to USC, but one of our family friends and one of my professors at Stanford, and you can look this gentleman up, it was a man named Professor Anthony Sutton. And Professor Sutton wrote a book called National Suicide. And he showed point for point how over the 20th century that the Soviet Union did not exist, that the military threat did not exist, that they were basically a paper bear that were being funded by the Rockefellers, that their entire military was bought and sold from the United States, that Ford Motor Company went and set up their tank factories. The whole thing was that we built up Russia as an enemy with American dollars, and he said there really is no threat from Russia. The entire Cold War is a massive hoax for them to be able to spend a whole bunch of money. Now, we may learn later that the Cold War and the trillions that have been spent on it were quite possibly for the United States and Russia to cooperate on a secret space.
This call is from a federal prison.
Because now Trump is talking about he's actually created the fifth arm of the military, which is the United States Space Force, and he may just reveal some of the ships that I talked about in the book Sands of Time. Because in Sands of Time we had two cruisers and one giant battleship. We had the USS Grissom, we had the John Glenn, we had the Shepherd, but there's other ships like the Forrestal, the Twining, mostly other ships that are actually named after the Majestic 12 guys, the first people that were the members of Majestic 12. So the crazy thing that we learn is that the reason Putin kicked Rockefeller out of Russia is because it turns out that the entire Soviet government, and also remember too, there were two governments. On the public side, you actually had the Soviet government, but what I learned years later is that on the private side, the imperial government of the czars still existed. And this goes into a whole big story about how, when I was a kid, I actually accompanied a reporter named Alan Stang, and we interviewed a man by the name of Michael Golensky, who was the top double agent. He defected to the United States with a Russian lector. Read your James Bond, you'll figure out what that is. And Golensky actually pulled down the British government by identifying Kim Philby as being a Soviet spy. And he pulled down the entire British government, which was basically full of Soviet spies and trolls. He also identified Henry Kissinger as being Agent Bohr, who was actually an agent for the Soviets living in East Germany at that time. By the way, Angela Merkel is also an East German communist before she became Chancellor of Germany, which is another reason why she did this big pipeline deal with the Russians. But I digress. The reason I point that out is because it turns out that Michael Golensky, and I believed him when I heard him say it, saw the documentation, that the royal family, Nicholas and Alexandria, and their entire family were not killed by the Soviets in Ekaterinburg, but were in fact rescued by American secret agents that were being funded by the Germans, Kaiser Wilhelm, and they got all of them out. And Michael Golensky went back into Russia, became the number one man in the Polish NKVD, and the number two man in the KGB, which is when he actually stole the lector and defected to the United States. But he was basically Peter, the Tsarevich. He had hemophilia when he was a child, et cetera, et cetera. So, not only does Vladimir Putin know all this, but it turns out that the Soviet Union, which had killed over 125 million people in its some 79 years of existence, the whole thing was a corporate front for the Rockefeller Corporation. And David Rockefeller was sitting there writing the checks as the executor of the bankruptcy of the Soviet Union. And when Putin took over, he almost arrested Rockefeller for war crimes, but didn't. And I thought it was crazy that the thing with the press conference today with Trump, he mentioned that $400 million was given by the Russians to tip the election, but on behalf of Hillary Clinton, that they were the ones that she set up the uranium deal for the Russians to go into New Mexico and buy uranium from the United States, which of course is used to make nuclear weapons. But the other thing that nobody notices about Putin is that Baron Nathan Rockefeller, who also owns the not Blackwater, but Blackstone, a big financial trust. You can trace everything back to about 4 or 5 huge financial trusts. But Baron Rothschild is the one that said that Vladimir Putin is an enemy of the New World Order. Now, yes, Putin wanted Donald Trump to win the election. And the reason he wanted Trump to win the election is because, ladies and gentlemen, if Hillary Rodham Clinton had won the election, not only would we be facing 2 Supreme Court justices that she would have been put in, but she wanted a war in Syria. She basically wanted to take down Russia and start World War III in Syria. And they actually knew that Donald Trump wouldn't do that. Now, one of the reasons why he's backing Assad in Syria is because Syria is a sectarian government. It's not radically Muslim. The ISIS guys, with the help of the CIA, wanted to overthrow Assad, and they keep saying, oh, he's a brutal dictator, all this other stuff. Well, he's also protecting something like 150,000 Christians in the country. And Putin's every action has been to protect Christians against the Muslim invasion, against the Muslim...
This call is from a federal prison.
Against basically what they're finding is that Islam is a virus. And you've got over 100,000 Muslim men, no women, no children, mind you, that have now oozed into Europe. And if you can get your hands on it, I think it's going for like $500 now. But my book, Dark Prophet, Veil of the Antichrist, that I wrote back in 2008 before I got all the Sands of Time stuff, I showed how a Muslim leader rises up, the third Antichrist, if you will, how he links all these Muslims together and how they defeat Europe or go into Europe using massive immigration. Now let me give you one other inside piece of information here. Melissa, poor darling, is over in Victorville, or Victimville as we call it, in the Analanto facility. This is also the facility where the federal workers are all, they're all picketing because they dumped 1,600 illegal aliens on them. And, all this nonsense about being separated, and there's only like 7 families that got separated. But according to the guards and the people over there, only 20% of these people speak Spanish. They all speak Arabic. So where are they coming from? They're oozing up through Mexico. Are they coming from Guatemala and Honduras? Or are they coming from Muslim countries like Somalia and Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia or wherever else? But I'm telling you that once again, we're stuck with all these mostly Muslims that the media has not told you about, and all these men coming across the border, and now they're finding a lot of kids that are supposedly separated. Turns out they were kidnapped. Turns out they were there not even with their biological parents. So there's that's leading into this whole thing. But as far as Putin goes, every action of peace that Putin has tried to attempt since he's been president or prime minister, he pulled all the Russian forces out of Eastern Europe, and George Bush rushed in and put in nuclear missiles that were actually pointed at Moscow. Now please remember, the Russian Federation is only 147 million people. That's not a lot. That's the population of Japan, basically. It's only 147 million people. They asked him today whether or not he would be upset. They talk about him annexing the Crimea. Well, that's not so. The Crimea was 95% Russian. 95% of the people also speak Russian, and they went to the United Nations, and they had a vote and a referendum in which 98% of the people voted to stay with Russia in Crimea, and now they're saying, oh, Putin's a big dictator, and he's annexed Crimea. And as far as the Ukraine goes, everybody forgets that they wanted the Ukraine to join the European Union. The president of Ukraine said, I can't do it because it would violate the sovereignty of the Ukraine. And so the United States then overthrew the legal government of the Ukraine and put in a puppet dictator there. So, anyway, I think Trump is doing a great job. I think everything he said was the truth today. I'm not surprised that he's getting grief from the media. Anything else? We've only got like 30 seconds left. Anything you want to ask?
All my regards from Becky and me, and we hope you and Melissa are out as soon as possible.
Oh, God bless everybody once again. Anybody wants to write me here, it's Sean Morton, P.O. Box 24549, Tucson, Arizona 89734. So once again, P.O. Box 24549, Tucson, Arizona. So write me a letter, send me a card. I'll write everybody back. And love you, appreciate you, and look for my blog. My blog's coming up. A friend of mine wrote a really nice blog about me and his experiences with me when he was here. Love you, buddy.